Gone for a walk lately? There's a recent study that indicates that consistent walking can actually prolong your life, but you may already have known that. What I'll bet you didn't know is that it can add up to 16 years to your lifespan. Researchers at the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom found that brisk walking slows the aging process in important ways. And the genetic reason is unexpected. Walking helps your DNA. Consistent walking makes your telomeres longer. And what are telomeres? Experts describe them like caps on the end of your chromosomes. Without them, your DNA is less stable, and as we age, our telomeres get shorter. Walking quickly helps slow that process. And how much do you have to walk to reap these benefits? Maybe as little as 10 minutes a day. Walking is good, but here's one better. Walk in step with the Spirit. This is of surpassing value. Welcome to Haven Today on this Monday. I'm David Wolin, sharing the great story that's all about Jesus. Today we're starting a new series called A Family That Prays Together. It's been said many times, and it's worth repeating. Family is God's creation, God's design. He wove families into the fabric of creation. He redeemed the world, actually, through a promise made to a family that became a nation that, when the time was right, led to a Savior being born into a family. And in a few days, we'll be celebrating Mother's Day. It's not a biblical holiday per se, but it is worth celebrating the unique ways mothers are image bearers, pointing us to our Creator. And in a Christian family, a mother plays a unique role in helping point her children to the Lord Jesus. And one of the most important things any Christian parent can do, not just for, but with their children, is pray. That's true all the time. But when a family goes through a hard time, that's when things aren't just taught, they're caught. When children may see for the first time what it really looks like to trust the Lord for everything in life. Well, in essence, that's the story we're telling this week on Haven Today. It's the true story of the Smallbone family. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, how about For King and Country or Rebecca St. James? They're all siblings, and they grew up in the Smallbone family. It's a story that was turned into a beautiful film called Unsung Hero.
On my last tour back home, I lost a lot of money.
A life of pages, waiting to be found.
How can we say goodbye to everything that we know and love?
This is my last chance. I want to do something that matters.
A heart that's hopeful, a head that's full of dreams.
However you guys feel about being here, we need to pray for everything that we need.
But this big on is harder than it seems.
But look around you. Your family, your faith.
Feels like
That's what makes you rich in life.
Welcome to Nashville, y'all. I don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. This is our exciting adventure together.
I trained this to be like you. You're my hero, Mum.
Just a sample there from Unsung Hero, a true story you'll hear more about in a moment, as we'll be joined by Rebecca St. James. But right now, I want you to know that this movie on DVD is our way of saying thank you for your support of this ministry of Haven Today. So could I invite you to call 800-65-HAVEN, and you'll get your copy of the DVD Unsung Hero as our thank you for your gift, 800-65-HAVEN, or go to haventoday.org and you can make your gift there. Again, haventoday.org.
So we have to be brave together. And it's not enough for us to just be here for Dad. We have to be here for each other as well. And we need to pray every day for everything that we need.
Can we pray now? I'll start. God, I pray that you'll give us everything that we need. A job for Dad. If it'll help, I wouldn't mind having one too.
Same.
Me too.
And we need food.
And a car.
And furniture. So we don't have to sleep on the floor. Not that I mind.
God knows he minds, so he might as well be honest, Benji.
All right, all right.
That's a scene from the Unsung Hero DVD that we're offering this week. This is Haven Today. I'm David Wolin, and joining us today is someone whose debut album I'm pretty sure I owned. Actually, I know I did. I owned it on a CD as a teenager. But Rebecca St. James, you were a teenager at the time as well, I think. So
yes,
welcome to Haven Today.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Yes, I was 16 when that first album came out.
That's right. Now, so your name is not actually St. James. You said Mrs. Fink is just fine. So tell us a little bit about your family today, and then we're going to go in a time machine and dial back a couple of decades here. But tell us, catch us up to today.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Rebecca Fink now. As of nearly 14 years ago, I married a wonderful man named Cubby Fink, and we have 3 children who are 11, 6, and 4. And then my family of origin was Smallbone, and, we had a movie come out last year about our family. So between St. James and Fink and Smallbone, I've got quite a few names. So I'll answer to all the above.
That's great. And so you're an Australian American. People can tell that listening to your voice. And I know that you kind of burst onto the scene of the Christian music scene back in the 90s. And like I said, I definitely had at least a few of your CDs, but you've done other things as well. You've been a songwriter, you've been an author, you're an actress, and you're a mom as well today. But you were referring to the film Unsung Hero, and that's what I wanted to talk with you about. My wife and I actually, we watched it yesterday. I wanted it to be fresh in my mind before we had a chance to talk today on the air. And okay, first I'll just tell the truth. We were both crying at the end of it.
Yeah.
For me, this is a really raw, emotional film, and I think it goes to a deep place. It is real, and it's very raw. I felt like it connected to some of my own story. And I think a lot of people are going to feel the same way. And so today I'd love for you to just kind of walk us through some of that story. And I'd love to just ask some questions along the way, especially because it's fresh in my mind. But it starts before you move to the States, right? The film opens up. You're a kid with a bunch of siblings, and you're still in Australia.
Yep. So I was 14 when we moved from the US. And so the film starts, kind of right before we moved. So kind of those, early teen years for me. 6 kids in the family at that time. My mom pregnant with my sister. And then we moved to the US because of my dad's job. So he got offered a job in Christian music in Nashville. So we moved straight to Nashville. And things were very exciting. We were really excited to be in the US. And it was a great adventure. And we were meant to be here for 2 years, and now over 30 years later, we're still here. And God had these beautiful plans for our family. But we hit a roadblock about 2 or 3 months after we moved, and Dad's job fell through. And now we were on the other side of the world with really not anything to go back to in Australia for my dad work-wise.
Yeah.
We were in a pretty dire circumstance, no income, no furniture, no car, sometimes we didn't know where the next meal was going to come from, and we prayed. And so it's a real story of prayer and faith.
Yeah. And so you were in a Christian family. I know your dad was involved in the Christian music industry. That was true back in Australia. That's what brought you guys out here and settled you in Nashville. And the story, there's at least 3 prominent storylines in the film. Yours is one of them. And your parents, mom and your dad is another. But then there's this storyline of faith and how the Lord came around your family. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, you're remembering this personally just through the eyes of a teenager. What do you remember it feeling like back then? Was that a scary time for you?
Remarkably not. Like I watched the movie now and I'm like, oh my goodness, like how would I have handled that as a parent? Because we're 3 kids. And my parents were remarkably faith-filled and quite peaceful and had quite a lot of joy. And I mean, usually kids can pick up, especially if you're 14, on some tremendous anxiety that your parents are experiencing, because it just plays out in every which way. But I really remembered just feeling like, we don't have much to our name, but mom and dad are not worried, and this is going to work out, and we're going to be fine, and we're going to trust God, and we're going to pull together, and it's going to be good. So I don't remember ever feeling panicky or overly scared. It was still an adventure, and it was still exciting, and it was going to be good. So I now look at that and just see really strong faith in my parents, because they were really trusting in God, and they just kind of knew that it would turn out, and it did. Yeah.
Wow.
A story to tell, quite a dramatic story to tell out of it.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, talk about some of the things you remember about how the Lord really met you along the way. You know, stories like that are so shaping of our faith. We believe these things to be true, but then it's not until real life, you know, kind of lands with a thud that we sort of prove it out in our own lives that these things are actually true. Yeah. So how did you experience that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in Australia, Dad was very successful. Like, he had a promotions company, a management company. He had, so he'd bring very successful Christian artists to Australia, and two of them. And so we were middle to upper class, you know, living that kind of life. And then we come to the US, and we're in this like pretty reasonably like lower middle class, I would say, house. And we weren't worried about it. Definitely it wasn't a thing that we were worried about, but it was definitely wild to have no furniture in our house. I mean, I think at the ages we were, we just embraced it, and the boys played cricket in the house. Yeah. Like, I mean, we just embraced that we had all this space to kind of play. So it was more fun for us than anything. But I vividly remember sitting on the floor and praying about the things that we needed. So food, money, a car. And I'm so impressed with my parents that they were that upfront with us too about how tough the situation was, because that's humbling, I think, for parents, because parents want to put on a good front, I think, often of like, yeah, we're good, we got it. And they didn't have it. Like, it wasn't all worked out. And so for them to be even so upfront with us, like, we've got to pray and we've got to trust God. And then to see it happen was just extraordinary, and really, like you said, built my faith. So, I mean, I saw, after we would pray for them, checks come in the mail that would cover rent by dollars, or people dropping groceries on our doorstep, or, you know, us gaining a house full of furniture from random people that we didn't know. And I mean, just thing after thing, somebody paying for my sister to be born in a hospital, us being given a car by a homeschool family. Like, it's interesting, because at the beginning of Unsung Hero, it says, this is a true story. Yeah. And most of the time you see this is based on a true story, and they're able to say this is because just about everything that you see on the screen is true. Some of it's condensed in a time sense or slightly exaggerated, but almost every detail is true. So having lived through that, it was just really amazing. And it gave me a testimony, you know, a couple years later when I went full-time in music at 16, I had something to say.
Yeah, no kidding. So that really has, in a real sense, shaped the way that you entered into your own ministry and career. It became the story that you were telling from the beginning. And
always have, and I still do. You know, I was in Washington, D.C. this last weekend, and Dallas yesterday. And whenever I do like a full show, I share this story that's now, 3 decades old, but it's still so real and relevant to me, and almost more relevant than ever now because of the movie. So that's right.
No, I know your brothers are Joel and Luke, King and Country. Would they say the same? We don't have them on the air right now, but would they interact with this story as well?
They definitely do. They've channeled it a little bit like differently in their work, in that Luke shares specifically about it every show when he talks about compassion. So both in my ministry and the boys' work, we've both talked about Compassion International and encourage people to sponsor kids, and that being a very direct kind of legacy of every show. And so Luke talks about it in that section, and talks about how people gathered around us in our time of need and poured into us, and our lives were radically changed. And we can do that for children in need as well, and in much more dire circumstances. So that's the way they kind of use it. And I had used that in my show, The Story, in that way as well. But now it's just kind of a part of my testimony every time I share. Yeah.
So let's then turn it to your parents. And I just want to ask you, the film is titled Unsung Hero. Yeah. Who is the unsung hero?
Most people would say my mom, you know. I think that's what I hear most often. In the film particularly, you see how much she was kind of struggling with the challenges of that time. And I think it's a little bit more, it's like dramatized for sure, because like there wasn't these, in the film, there's some very dramatic moments, like in the kitchen and a fax machine thrown on the floor and stuff. There was never anything that happened like that. And so you didn't see it play out. I remember my dad couldn't get out of bed for a few hours one day, which is highly unusual for him. He's very, very driven and type A and just always, going. So in the film, it shows it was a couple of days. I think it was a few hours of him like being really down and not seeing his way forward. But I think, both my parents were heroes in the way that they trusted God, with the circumstances that they were thrown in a pretty radical way. I'm really thankful for the choices that they made, because they could have turned away in fear, like this is too much and we'll just go back to Australia and figure it out, live with parents for a while. But they didn't. They faced it and moved forward. And my ministry, my brother's ministry, all of it is like fruit of them making very courageous choices.
That's awesome. And through it all, bringing you as a family before the Lord in prayer, that's a very constant theme throughout. And I actually really appreciated that. My wife and I were talking after the film. It brought up a lot for me, just personally. My family went through a very tough season as well when I was a kid. And we finished the film and she turned to me and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, this is raw stuff. Like, this is really hard things. A lot of people have been through some really scary times. In fact, based on what's going on around us right now, just in the overall economy, I would imagine there's some people who are feeling some pretty serious fear even right now. And I said, I'm just grateful for the way that they didn't kind of gloss over how hard these things are, but also what it looks like to just really bring it before the Lord in our own helplessness and ask for the very basic things that we need, you know? And I was thinking, would we as parents involve our kids like this? I hope we would. But I found that very inspiring and just really helpful in watching the film. So maybe one last question before we finish up this section of today. And I do want to continue the conversation in tomorrow's program, but thinking back to your mom, I think there's a line in the film. It's something like, you're the glue. How does your mom look back and remember these events? How does she articulate this through the lens of faith?
I think my parents are very thankful for that time. I don't think they'd want to go through it again. They've definitely said that. Like it was a lot. But I think they're really thankful for all the good fruit that they've seen God do through it and bring through it. And I think that they sit in a time in their lives now at almost 70, my mom, and then my dad, 75. I think they just feel exceedingly thankful for what God did in our lives in that time. And just, the movie, and, mom's written a book and I've written a book with my husband that's just come out, and the testimonies. So I think it's this mixed bag. It's funny because my dad cries every single time he watches the movie, and he's watched it a lot because there was a lot of premieres last year.
Sure.
And then he's still involved in management of my brothers. So, he's kind of in the weeds with all of it. And then my mom, like at the premiere, doesn't cry. And I'm like, Mom, how? Like everyone else cries. I cry every time and you don't cry. So I think there's a little bit of like the stoic, like, this is just my opinion. I don't know if she would feel this, but I think it was really challenging. And I think to kind of fully feel all the feels of, I walked through that, I lived that, is probably not what she does every day, even watching the film. But I think what she has said is where she gets emotional is at the end, when it's like in the credits rolling, I think, where are they now? Or it's like the very end. And let's talking about where all of us kids are at now, what we're doing, kids.
Yeah.
I think that's where it connects for her. And if she's going to get teary, that's where she gets teary. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's a great story. The movie is Unsung Hero, and it's the story of the Smallbone family, of which you, Rebecca St. James, you were part of that. And thank you so much for giving of your time and sharing your family's story with us.
Thank you.
I'm David Wolin, and this is Haven Today, inviting you to come back tomorrow and hear more with Rebecca St. James. And then later in the week, we're going to hear from her mother as well. And I think when you watch their story, you'll probably find your story in it, at least a little bit. I know I did, because we've all faced hard times. But it's so encouraging to watch a movie that actually shows a family praying together, trusting in Jesus. And when you make your gift and get your copy of the DVD Unsung Hero, based on the true story of the Smallbone family, 3 things will happen. 1, you're going to be encouraged by the story. 2nd, you're going to be blessed because this is a great family-friendly movie. But 3rd, you're going to help Haven keep sharing the great story that's all about Jesus on your local station and radio stations all over North America. And I'd love to send you Unsung Hero on DVD. It's our way of saying thank you for your support of this ministry of Haven today. You can call at 865-HAVEN and make your gift. Again, 865-HAVEN, or go to haventoday.org and make your gift there. Again, haventoday.org. I'm David Wolin, inviting you to come back again next time. We'll be keeping it all about Jesus. It's the great story here on Haven Today.